Hi, this is Steve Rigolosi, and tonight on Forgotten Mysteries, I have for you True or False, a novel of suspense by Miriam Borgenicht. And this is copyright 1982 by St. Martin's. So the first thing I want to say is, oops, there's my card in there with my mini review reminding me when I read the book and what I thought about it. Let's take a look at this cover. Is this a good cover for a suspense novel? It is not. It looks like something out of Jane Austen or some sort of drawing room comedy of manners. Just there's nothing at all to convey a sense of suspense about this cover. And then if you look at the back cover too, the type is so light that it's barely legible. So I love critiquing jackets as much as I love talking about books. And I have to say, this jacket does no favors to this book. I can't imagine an author approving this or an editor approving this cover for this book. But whatever, I wasn't the editor. So a little bit about Miriam Borgenicht. There's not really a lot of biographical information that I could find about her. She wrote about 17 or 18 novels of suspense, and I think that they veered or varied from pretty good to not so good. I think she was on a bit of a sine wave. Prior to this one, I had read two of her books. I read Ring and Walk In. It was the first book I read by her, and I like that. That made me think I want to read more of Miriam Borgenicht. And then I read another book of hers called ROADBLOCK, and I just found that one very undeveloped, very underplotted. It really didn't have much of a story, didn't go anywhere, wasn't very suspenseful in my opinion. But I liked the first one enough to try another one, and I found this one in the used bookstore for like $3. So I thought, let me read a little bit more of Miriam's oeuvre and see how my thinking on her changes with the reading experience. And I have to say, on this one, I thought it was pretty good. It wasn't perfect. It has some flaws, but overall, I liked it for a couple of reasons. But let me first tell you a little bit about the plot. It's a first-person narration. Our narrator's name is Ada, and she is sort of a merry widow. She's rather a flibberty-gibbet. She likes to go out and have a good time and go shopping and wear pretty clothes and have a handsome male lover. And she's just not the kind of person that you think, oh, you've got a lot of depth, Ada. She doesn't really. She's not on the surface that complex of a person. And as so often happens, she has a daughter who is the polar opposite of her. Her daughter, Lori, is a very serious person who is very much into social justice and doing the right thing and working with prisoners. And mother and daughter are opposite ends of the spectrum. And yet it is a loving and close relationship. And I thought that Borgenicht captured that well, that in our own families, we can have people who are so different from us that we would never think to be friends with them if we met them outside of the house we grew up in. But there is sort of a love there, and a closeness, even when there is frustration or misunderstanding. And so I thought Borgenicht got the relationship between Ada and her daughter very nicely put down there on the page. And I think it's also interesting to see throughout this book that Ada may not be quite as shallow as she makes herself out to be. She is rather sharply observant of her own social scene and her place within it, and the idea that she's playing a role, if you will, of a good time gal who just wants to have fun following the death of her husband, and you know, don't bother me with anything serious. But as the book opens, she is dealing with what should be a happy occasion, but rapidly goes downhill. And that is that her daughter has gotten married. And Ada is thrilled because she thought secretly, who would ever want my daughter? She's such a wet blanket. She's such a limp noodle. She's no fun. Like, what guy is ever going to want to be around her? But Laurie meets Carl and love happens and they get married. But no sooner do they get married than Ada starts to realize that there are just pieces that are not falling into place. That Carl appears to really have no family or no emotional connections. She finds out that her daughter wrecked the film that the photographer was taking of their wedding pictures. And everything just points to the fact that maybe Carl is not totally on the up and up, and that Laurie knows about it. So the mother is trying to think, do I interfere? Do I not interfere? There's that tug of war within herself, that push and pull. But she does find out pretty early, so this isn't a spoiler, that Carl is accused of murder. He's out on bail, and he has decided to jump bail with Laurie's money. Laurie is Ada and her husband Brock are wealthy, so Laurie has plenty of her own money, and she's totally willing to finance this guy jumping bail so that they can be together. Meanwhile, Carl, it comes across as a very menacing character, so you don't know what to make of him. And once he realizes that Ada has found out, there's a lot of stress between them, with him saying, how can we ever trust you? And Ada responding, how can I ever believe a word you guys say? You're never going to be able to have a normal life. You can't have passports. You can't have driver's licenses. Someone will find out eventually and you'll be on the lam. Is that a way to live? And the plot goes from there as threats start happening to Ada. I don't want to tell you what they are. They're rather creepy and they're rather disturbing. And I should warn you, if you're one of those people who is very squeamish about any kind of violence to animals, this is something you'll want to be warned about before you get into this book. It's not bloody and gory, but it does happen. And it's frightening to Ada, certainly disconcerting. And the story becomes sort of a running of the clock in terms of, will Ada prevail in terms of convincing her daughter that she's got to get rid of this guy? Will Carl keep his sort of hold over Laurie? Who's going to win? Who's going to win Laurie? So it's quite a brief book, about 170 pages, and I thought it was nicely suspenseful. The first chapter sets up the whole story pretty well, and then it's labeled a novel of suspense, and that is accurate. You do keep reading. Some of the things that happen are a little unbelievable. They just don't quite scan. They don't feel as if they're pulled out of reality. They feel almost like something that you would only see in a novel, including one particular thing that happens that I don't want to tell you about, but you'll know it when you see it. You'll say, wow, this is an odd left turn. Couldn't she think of anything better? But like I said, the book goes quickly, and I enjoyed the first person narrative. It's sharp. I enjoyed the narrator's insights into herself, even though some of her decisions are questionable, even though she gets kind of wishy-washy in places. But I think overall it's a good book. Not as good as Ring and Walk In, but much better than Roadblock. I guess you'd put it in the genre of damsel or damsels, plural, in distress. And how will they get themselves out of that situation? And, think maybe Victoria Holt a little bit, although, much more modern. And Phyllis A. Whitney, maybe a little bit, although not as much. But kind of a gothic / domestic suspense element here that you might enjoy if that is your cup of tea. I don't think Borgenicht ever really made it, say, to the A list of mystery writers, which won't surprise you since on this channel I like to review forgotten or lesser known mystery writers. But I think she's probably worth a try. If you see any of her books in a used bookstore, maybe read the first few pages, see if it appeals to you. With Ring and Walk In, the first few pages, I thought this is going to be good, and it was. And with Roadblock, I read the first few pages and I thought, I don't know about this. And it turned out I didn't love it. With True or False, I read the first few pages. I found the narrator's voice engaging enough, and I liked that sense of things just being slightly off in the first chapter to whet my appetite to read more. And read it very quickly, and I will say that I enjoyed it. I wouldn't give it an A, but I would give it a solid B. So that's what I've got for you tonight. Miriam Borgenicht, True or False. Here it is. If you read it, let me know what you think of the title. The title is a bit of a cipher. I think I know what she meant by it, but it's maybe a little too cryptic, and make it sound like you're taking, a multiple choice true or false test in college or high school. I don't know. Okay, but that's what I've got for you tonight. True or False by Miriam Borgenicht. Thank you for listening, and I'll be back next time. Good night.